everyone. Welcome to another episode of High Stakes with Steve Rozenberg. Today, we're going to talk about our favorite subject, which is real life, real business, and real situations. Now, I would say that I consider myself someone who is a very determined person growing up and trying to be the best person that I could be. But I would say I am dwarfed by the gentleman that I have on today. When I found out that he was going to be a guest on the show, I was super excited, not because I do what he can do. I don't want to say I don't think I can, because that's probably not the right thing. I've never attempted to do what this gentleman has done. And so I'd love to just pick his brain and just kind of understand more about him, what he does, who he is, and more importantly, why he does what he does. So James Lawrence, the Iron Cowboy, is our guest today. James, thanks for being on with me, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, Steve. Looking forward to the conversation.
So if you don't mind, I'm sure you've done this 1,000 times. Can you give us your kind of bio and how you got to be this guy that you are today?
Oh man. Yeah, that's a lengthy list of, because what we've done is spanned the course of a decade.
Right.
And so, you hear there's no such thing as an overnight success. And it's absolutely true. It's through the trenches of hard work that we arrive to certain places in our lives. But, I started, well, first I'll go way back. I grew up in Calgary, Canada. I grew up as a wrestler. I tried every single sport. I love wrestling. I love golf and I love triathlon, all individual pursuits. I had a mortgage company, lost everything in the economy, had a passion for racing and wanted to raise money for charity, and just started running with my wife, and we got into the triathlon community together. And then just things escalated over time. And when you're continually pushing boundaries, more and more becomes possible as you gain momentum. And early on, my goal was just to do one single full Ironman, which is a 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike ride, 26.2 mile run, 140.6 miles. And then over the course of the past 10 years, broke the world record for the most half Ironmans in a year, broke the world record for the most full Ironmans in a year. Then in 2015, we did 50 consecutive full distance Ironman events in 50 states, all 50 days. And then just last year, we finished our most recent world record, which was consecutive full distance triathlons, 140.6 miles a day for 100 consecutive days, a quarter of a year, no days off, 14,200 plus miles. So there was a lot there, and we did a lot of crazy things in between there. We coach, we speak, we're an author, we got a documentary, we got a movie coming out. And so that's the real fast version of who I am and how we got here.
So let me ask you this, and I've got a ton of questions just because I love who you are. I love the person that you've become by doing this. My background is real estate. Well, my original background is being an airline pilot, but I guess my question is everything that you do, right? All the things that you do, would you say that you do it to be better, or do you do it not to be worse? Like, are you moving forward towards something or away from something you don't want?
Yeah. So a couple things. I believe in life, we're never just like standing still. And if we're not moving forward, we're moving backwards, meaning not progressing. And I think the goal in this life is to continually push boundaries, push limits, chase the most refined, unbelievable version of who we are. That's everybody's goal and pursuit. But it's an interesting question, because there's an assumption with endurance racing and these massive personal challenges that I am either running from something, escaping something. I have some type of significant trauma in my past. I've been addicted to things. All of these assumptions come into play. Right. And the reality is, man, I had a great upbringing. I've obviously faced trials and challenges like a lot of people do. We live in an unbelievable country. And so opportunity is abundant. But to be honest with you, I'm chasing potential. I'm chasing that mythical person of who is me, who is years ahead of where I am now. And that is a continually moving target. And so I think I'm actually chasing potential rather than running away from something.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's a great way to put it. And I think that, I hear a lot of people, and Tim Grover talks about people having a dark side, and sometimes they got to dig into that dark side to push them through times. What gets you through your times? Do you have a dark side? Do you believe people have that in order to get them to push past what their mind thinks that they can fail at and they don't? Like, how do you push past those limits?
So I'm going to challenge that, and I'll flip the script on you.
Okay.
And to me, it's not the dark side that gets me through those difficult moments. I'm not motivated by proving people wrong or doing this. And when I'm in those dark moments, it's not darkness, or to me, I hear the word darkness and I associate that with negativity. And to me, to get through difficult challenges, you have to be filled with light and positivity. And so for me, it's about remembering moments and times in my lives when it was super positive and things were a little bit easier, and great conversations, great relationships, great memories. That's what gets me through those difficult times. It's not this negative drive per se.
Right.
And I don't even know if that's what Grover is saying when he says, the darkness. I guess if in that context, I don't want to be fueled by that. So for me, everything has to do with positivity, light, community, things like that.
Yeah, I guess when I think of the dark side, I just think of something that's inside you that you have to pull out. That, and again, I guess I don't think of it as a negative connotation. I just think of it, it's maybe something that's in the closet until you need it. And maybe it's that extra push. Maybe it's that extra drive that you need to get you, if you're doing 100 miles and you're at mile 20 and you're hurting, you've got to dig in somewhere to pull out those next 80 miles, and so everybody has that push. And I think everybody has it, whatever you want to call it, like you said, whether it's a dark side, whether it's your inner being, whatever your term you want to use. But I feel that everybody, in the gym, right? Everybody has that extra push to get that extra rep, whatever that is. I'm just curious if you've had to cultivate that as you've done more and more endurance training to get it to a higher level than the average.
Yeah. So with that explanation, I think a common phrase that everyone would resonate with would be your alter ego.
Okay.
And so there's me, there's James Lawrence, who's the father of 5, the married husband of 22 years. And then there's the Iron Cowboy. And there is that transition when I need to, I've got to flip that switch and I become the Iron Cowboy, that alter ego. And that's what drives me and fuels me. And that only comes from experience. And as we continue to push the envelopes and increase the level of our challenges, we only gain momentum and rely on our past experiences because we've done it before. And now we know how to flip that switch. And I've got a great team around me, and we all know how to do it, because that, with what we do and how we do it, the option's never to quit or abandon course. It's to adapt, adjust, and push through. And in order sometimes to adapt, adjust, and push through, you have to be able to flip that switch, figure out how to fuel that alter ego or get pushed by the dark side.
So let me ask you this. When you were doing your 50 for 50, when you were done for the day, would you go back and reassess what you did good, what you did bad, what you would recorrect for the next day? Or were you just trying to get through day after day?
Yeah, interesting, because we were averaging, it was just complete chaos, right? We averaged less than 4 hours of sleep a night. And the United States is enormous, and you would do your task during the day, and you would be barreling through the middle of the night to get to the next state to do it again. And it was hard to evaluate what happened the day before, because the set of circumstances that is ahead of you is completely different. We're talking different state, different course, different people, different environment, different weather. And so there was only so much that we could plan for and plan on duplicating the next one. And so for me, my job, I became so debilitated with fatigue and chaos and injury that I had to really trust and rely on my team. And my job was just to 2.4 swim, 112 bike, 26.2 mile marathon run. Like, and then outside of any of that, it was the job, it was the team of the job of the team to make those adjustments, to evaluate what went wrong, to start to put systems in place, because nobody had done this before. We hadn't done this before. And I mean, it took us 20 plus days to really start to gain momentum and look at those 20 days as we were going through them and as a whole. What do we need to change? What systems can we implement? How do we systemize this, right? Because, you know, James Clear, and I'll screw up the quote, but it's not about the goals or the objectives that make you successful. That's the easy part. It's the systems that you have in place in order to accomplish or get closer to those goals. And so I think, you know, as we evolved and made our way across the United States, we continued to refine that process. And from the outside looking in, fast forward to the 100, I mean, that's a massive jump. I mean, we doubled what everybody said was impossible, but the whole concept was, look, based on our experience, what we've learned in the past, can we put team and systems in place? Can we remove chaos? And at that point, we believe that doubling what everybody thought was impossible was possible based on the experiences that we'd have, that continual refinement of it.
So, I mean, basically you had chaos, but you had controlled chaos. You guys controlled it through systems and structure.
Very, we tried to.
Right. Yeah. Well, and then you've got exterior circumstances. And, let me ask you this. How much of your business acumen came into play here? Because you said you're in the mortgage industry before. How much of that came into play for this? Because everything you just said is essentially running a business. It's the CEO, it's having the right team and leveraging them.
Yeah, I mean, huge. And I think it stems all the way back to having a family and running a good family unit. That translates well into business, and that translates well into project management and campaigns. And so all of those are different categories, but they follow the same fundamental rules, that you have to remove chaos. You have to put systems in place. You've got to put the right people on the right seats on the, on the adventure. And so, yeah, a lot of my experience setting up companies and being an entrepreneur fall into place. That's really at the core of what we are. We're fundraisers, we're entrepreneurs, we are all of it. I mean, we're just trying to figure out a way to impact the most amount of people and at the same time feed our families.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. What was the reason for doing the 50? You said no one had, I'm sure people have tried to do it and attempted, and at some level, I'm sure. What was your reason for doing it?
Yeah, many have tried it since we have done it successfully. And really, I had just broken the world record for the most full Ironmans done, all official events. It was 30 Ironmans through 11 countries, all races. And right at the tail end of that, I was like, man, more is possible. And that's how it is with anything, right? You get to the point where you're in the middle of a journey and it seems impossible, but then once you finish it, all of a sudden a new mountain comes into view that you couldn't see before, and you start to gain momentum, and you take the learnings from that and apply it. And for me, right at the tail end, so race 27 of 30 in that year, I was like, I knew we had it. It was just a matter of time and putting in the work to finish that world record. But I was watching the endurance space, and there was a gentleman named Dean Karnassus, who's an ultra endurance runner. And years before this, he had done 50 marathons in 50 days in 50 states. And I was kind of looking to push the envelope beyond what I did. And I thought to myself, wow, if he has had an amazing career of impacting people and fundraising and all this stuff by doing a marathon through 50 days, what would happen if I pulled it off with an Ironman, right? Because marathon's just the run portion, which is still spectacular and very challenging. But I just upped it a little bit and said, let's swim 2.4, that's bike 112, right? Because a marathon, it was taking Dean, 3 hours a day to do it. It takes us 14 hours to do what we were doing. And so that was kind of like, I was on that journey. I was continuing to push the envelope. I'd broken the 2 world records. And I thought to myself, if that dude can do that, what could I do based on the trajectory of our journey at this point?
So you did that, then you did the 100. Let me ask you this. You hear about the 4-minute mile, and that was obviously said that nobody could do it. It wasn't physically possible. Somebody did it, and then all of a sudden a bunch of other people did it. But you said you did the 50, and no one else has been able to duplicate that. Why do they fail, in your opinion?
Yeah, many people have tried to do the 50, all have failed. And in my opinion, the reason is because they're going from 0 to 50. And I say I do a lot of speaking, and I say, look, guys, you can't go from 0 to 100. There's got to be framework put before that. And it wasn't intentional, but it just happened. I continually built upon the foundation that we were laying. And so 2010, most half Ironmans ever done. 2012, most fulls ever done. That led us to a 2-year campaign to where we're building on that fitness to where we believed the 50 was possible. And then because of that, we continued to build and the 100 was possible. But the problem is people get motivated, inspired. They see somebody do it, and then they go to try to duplicate it without doing all of the groundwork and preparation up to it. And they inevitably get injured. And I believe it takes the right team to do it. The 4-minute mile is very different. All the people that are breaking that barrier were already fit, were already great runners. They just now had the belief that they could do it. But people that are coming and trying to break the 50 or the 100, they're just coming out of the gates and trying to do it instead of really having that long buildup. It took me a decade to get to the point where we could believe and conceptualize and go after the 50. And so I think that's the biggest problem is someone sees something, they did it, but they don't really realize everything that happened before it and all of that groundwork that took place.
Wow, that's interesting. So basically you have a recipe for baking your cake of 50. That's the recipe. Do you think if somebody, I mean, I've got to imagine someone's got to go, why don't I just follow what he did and bake the same cake? But yet they still have not figured out. And it's been a while. And now you've baked a bigger cake at the 100. Do you think someone's eventually going to follow your recipe and say, well, obviously this is what worked for him? You know, people have drive, they have the ability. Is there something else that's missing that's causing them not to?
Yeah, just experience. Just experience, because success breeds success. Momentum has to happen. And again, you have to put the right team in place. And that individual has to have the desire or the reason why, because there is going to get to a moment on that 50 or 100, whatever they're trying to do, that their why or reason isn't strong enough. And ours has always been attached to setting an example for my kids, being a man of my word, and then attaching it to a charitable component to where we're raising funds and trying to impact other people. And really, we were trying to bring community together and bring everybody else with us that was around us. And so, you know, it's going to take the perfect storm for someone to be able to do it. They have to have the desire, the passion, the teamwork, the time, the resources, and everything to make that happen. And now, you know, nobody's going to want to do 30 Ironmans in a year because we did 50. Nobody's going to want to do 50 because we did 100. And 100 is so damn daunting that it's going to prevent other people from trying it. Now, is somebody going to do it eventually? Absolutely. And I'll encourage them and cheer them along the whole way. Because I think it's really cool, but it will take a special individual with the right circumstances to even take a crack at it. And then there's a ton of luck involved throughout the whole process.
So now you did the 50, you did the 100. Obviously, I would imagine you are a goal-oriented person. How do you create goals that keep you driven past this?
Yeah, it's hard, you know, coming off the 100 direction, the 1-year anniversary of it. And I had to really respect the trauma and chaos that we went through. And I had to take a year off mentally. I had to go through some cognitive therapy to reset some neurological pathways. Physically, I was very broken. Spiritually, I just had to really get my life back together. And so I'm now, you know, not as fit as I was a year ago. You take a year off doing anything and you slip, you don't give it attention and you fall back. And so for me, it's getting back to normal fitness. It's getting back to competitive, fun racing and structured races. End of June, we're going to be doing a race called the RAM, Race Across America. We're going to bike 3,000 plus miles across the country. End of this year, we're going to do what's called Otillo Swim Run World Championships. You're in and out of the water. It's 24 run segments, 23 swim segments, 40 miles of running, 10 miles of swimming. And so really for me, it's not a big physical challenge that's coming next. It's getting me personally, mentally, and physically back into shape. It's doing fun races with friends and community. And I believe now after the 100, I am fully satisfied with what I've accomplished in that arena. And now I can take all of those same principles and apply it to my family and my business. I mean, I've got 4 teenage girls at home, a 12-year-old boy. I'm still continually trying to refine my marriage and making sure that's the highest quality possible. But now really I'm going to shift my focus to helping other people achieve things like this, whatever that means to them. I'm a big advocate, and I preach a lot that everybody's heart is different. And I want to help people achieve their version of hard, because we're all on a different spectrum of what our journey is. And some are at the beginning, some are the middle, some are close at the end. But at some point in time, there's roadblocks. And typically that roadblock comes in the way of belief, conviction. And as humans, we're getting in our own way. And it's just all in the space, the conversations that we're having. And so I really want to help people overcome that. And in fact, on May 1st, as of this recording, so in about 2 weeks, we're doing a 20-week mindset course that's already sold out, to really help people. And we're going to engage every single week. But that's really where my focus and attention is now, is to help other people. Here's what's really cool is I get to do 2 things as a speaker and as a coach. And these are the 2 most powerful things that I believe a person can do. The first one is I'm going to give you something, and I'm going to give you hope. And my favorite book is Man's Search for Meaning. And in that book, it's about a gentleman who was in a concentration camp who was living off of hope, and it was allowing him to continue. And he could tell the moment that somebody lost hope because they would die. And so he started to correlate hope with life. And the other thing too is I believe that excuses can be crippling, and it'll freeze someone. And excuses is also tied to fear. And so if I can give a person hope, and I can remove excuses, entitlements, and fears, that person becomes invincible to go live the best version and give them a chance of chasing down the ultimate character or being of themselves.
You know, your story that you talked about, the book, it reminds me of, I believe his name is Viktor Frankl.
Yep.
That was in the concentration camps, and he would focus on the good things in the camp. And that's what kept him alive, and obviously other people. You know, one of the things you said, a couple of things I'd like to kind of step back a little bit. You know, I've had the opportunity of meeting high achievers, as you have, some Olympic athletes and also astronauts. And what I found is both of them, these people told me that once they get to that destination of winning an Olympic medal or going to the moon, there's really nothing else for them to do. They built their whole life doing this, and now there's no sense of meaning. And one time I talked to one gentleman, and he said, you know, what I did is I turned my attention to helping other people, because he said, where am I going next? Mars? Like, what's the next destination for me to go to? I can't do that. That's not going to happen. So do I live in the past and dwell on what I don't have anymore? Or do I embrace and help people like you're doing? And it seems like a lot of people that are successful, probably similar people that you and I both know together, very much turn into the educators in this, maybe the second half of their lives or the lives after they're successful, to be able to impart the wisdom. And it sounds to me like that's what you're doing. Instead of saying, well, I'm going to do, 400 and 400, I'm going to start helping other people and serving the masses. Is that kind of along those lines?
Yeah, so accurate and beautifully said. So if you look at it, like my grandmother lived an unbelievable life. She just passed recently, age of 90. We had a life celebration for her, but I just turned 46 last week. And if you look at it in that context and lifespan, I'm literally 50% of the way through my life. And yes, could I go do 200 and 200? Absolutely. I have the knowledge to do it. I know I have the work ethic to do it. I know I have the team to do it. I just don't want to. The upswing isn't there. Like, if that was my goal, I'd know what I want. And the biggest question that people need to ask is, okay, if you know what you want, do you know what you're willing to sacrifice? And in order to accomplish that, the upswing isn't there for me, and I'm not willing to sacrifice what it would take. And so, yeah, I'm at that point now where I'm like 50% of the way through my life. Heaven forbid that I don't make it to 90. But if the cards stack out and my genetics say so, and I make it to 90, I now have 45 more years to help other people along on their journey and to impart that knowledge that we've experienced. Because our team is one of 7 billion. If there's 7 billion people in the world, we're the only people in the world that's been able to accomplish. That's really cool to say. And with that comes some responsibility to now I have the desire to help other people do it, because I've traveled around the world. I've spoken in 48 countries, and literally I'm watching people be their toughest critics, to be hardest on themselves, and to get in their own way. And that's all taking space right here. It's just a change of conversation that you have with yourself. I'll share a quick story. Well, I was doing the world's toughest race in Fiji. It was a Mark Burnett production. Bear Grylls was the host. It was map and compass navigation. I'm talking the back part of Fiji, and it was jungle trekking, ocean sailing, kayak. I mean, just unbelievable things. And we got on the race site, and the director was like, "Congratulations on everything you guys have done. Totally amazing. Zero chance you finish our race. You're way outside your element." And I was like, "Okay, cool." And we just continued to show up and chip away, and smiles on our faces. And we started to turn the entire film production crew, 1,000 camera people, and the producer and everything. And they became fans of what we were doing because of our, not being fueled by darkness, but just having a good time and impacting people, helping people along the course. And we weren't there to win, we were there to have an experience. And we came into the last final major checkpoint. And the race director comes up to us. He knows we're all world-class cyclists. And he comes up to us and he goes, "Guys, I'm so excited. The most difficult, hardest part of the race is coming up. It's the bike section. I thought of you guys when I created it. You guys are going to crush it." And we were all fired up. We were like, "Hell yeah. Not only are we going to finish this thing, we've got an advantage going into this next section." And we leave camp to go set out on our bikes. And one of our team members is just in tears. And I look back, and next thing I know, she's on the side of the road. She's hyperventilating, can't breathe. And in this type of racing, it's like one fail, all fail. You're a team. And we were like, "Man, it's over. Like, we're done." And I went back to her, and I just started to have a conversation with her and just try to figure out what she was, make sure she was safe. And really, over the course of the next 15 or so minutes, I got her to realize, look, I can carry your pack. I can push your bike. I can do but what I can't do is change the way that you're thinking. And it's one of my favorite things. It's called catastrophizing. And what was happening is, as a team, we were happy and joyful, but we were exhausted. We were 7 days into this race of the back jungle and self-supported and all these things. And on the brink of being broken, when somebody says to you, the hardest, most challenging part of the race is still yet to come, even though that's our expertise, all she heard was the hardest thing is upcoming. Not having any real knowledge of what it is, it broke her mentally. And what was fascinating, and as we changed the way she thought in that moment, nothing else changed, meaning our equipment, the weather, the enormity of the hill that was coming. All that changed was the way that she perceived the future moment. And in that moment, once we changed that, we started to fly. We ended up passing 17 teams in that section. And again, the only thing that changed was the way she was thinking. And that was just so fascinating to me. And it really emphasized the importance of the conversation that we're all having in our heads. And really, as adults, we're getting in our own way. And I truly believe it's a learned trait, because if you look at kids, they don't even know what catastrophizing is, and they're not doing it. It's something that's been taught to us at a certain point in time. And eventually we just believe in it, and we fixate on a mythical event in the future that hasn't happened yet. And it's always the worst case scenario.
It's interesting you say that, because I always relate that when people say like, "Oh, I'm going to start a new business." Everybody will tell you all the things that will go wrong in this business. Of course, they've never done it, but that's regardless. But I'm like, well, you pretty much have just as much chance of it going right. I mean, you could be successful. You could make money. Somebody borrows money to do something, like, "Oh, what if I lose the money?" I'm like, but what if you make money? Like, isn't that why you're doing it? I mean, you've got a shot at it. Otherwise, why would you do it? And I think that I know that our brains are set to protect us from damage or harm. And that's our reactionary mode. I've always learned, I'm curious, your thoughts, is that we have triggers, and you could create triggers to get you out of that state, to change the perception of the situation you're in. Do you believe in the triggers? I guess first question. And do you utilize them? If so?
Yeah, 100%. Like, there's triggers that'll trigger you emotionally and put you to spiral. And then there's things that you can say and do that'll bring you out of the spiral. And I believe success happens when, we're not perfect, and it's not going to be a constant flow of perfection and greatness, right? But I believe in fast turnarounds. Like, if you like everybody should feel and process and navigate the good and the bad, as long as you don't sit there and dwell on it and then start to spiral, right? So those quick turnarounds. Another quick story on the 100, I got into some, I mean, you talk about 140 miles a day for a quarter of a year, you're going to gain some injuries and have to figure out how to navigate those. And you're talking 14,200 plus miles consecutively, propelled by the human body and spirit. And early in the journey, I got an injury, and it swelled up into my leg, and it created the stress fracture. And by literally day 5, I was broken and trying to, like, I was literally waiting for the moment my leg was going to break. And I was like, well, this is the only way that the public will accept me stopping, is if I snap my leg in motion. And I was willing to do that. And I make it to day 15, and the pressure and the pain has just mounted so great. I was passing out on the run, and my team would catch me. I'd come back to, and this is to your question, we had 3 words. It was a mantra. And when I'd pass out, I'd come back to, I'd be like, okay, I need a total mind and body reset. And it was a simple phrase. It was 3 words, and it was just, here we go. And as soon as we said the words, here we go, it was like, okay, we're moving again. And then it was, that pressure would mount and build, and I black out because I couldn't manage that pain anymore in my mind. But it was that simple 3-word phrase that completely allowed us to reset and keep going. And so you learn what your personal triggers are, what you can and can't do. But the number one question I get is, how do I become more mentally tough? How do I develop that knowledge of that phrase or trigger or emotion to keep going? And it's only through experience. It's only through having been broken, backed into a corner, and then having the courage to get back up and do it again, and keep going, without, rationalizing the moment and validating your desire to quit, right? Losing that battle with yourself. So it only comes through practice. But for me, it was 3 simple words: here we go.
Man, that is powerful. I love that. Let me ask you, how, when you're on these runs and doing everything that you're doing, how do you block distractions? How do you, obviously I would imagine, at least for me, my mind would wander. How do you bring it back? Because there's a lot of focus that needs to go on, but that's a long time of having to focus. So how do you block out any distractions that you have?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that people struggle with is, being by themselves, being in silence, or managing the conversation that they're having with themselves. And most people need all of these distractions, well, not because they're not happy or content with who they are and the experiences that they've had. And it's either riddled with guilt or an inability to process what they've done, things like that. And so for me, I embrace my past. I try to learn from it. I have those conversations with myself. And during those long stretches, you come in and out. And sometimes when it's really hard, I have the ability to just clear my entire mind and be with my thoughts, or be completely blank. And that only comes from being able to do that through experience. And there's other times where I take it as an opportunity to listen to an audiobook, listen to podcasts of leaders and influential and inspirational people. Try to occupy my mind that way. I during the ride every single day. I mean, you talk about, again, a quarter of a year of, the bike ride was six plus hours a day that you are with your thoughts. And it was either music or podcast, or it was an opportunity for me to learn, educate myself, and grow. And so I just really multitask during those times. And sometimes I was just like, okay, I need silence. Nobody talk to me. I need my team to barricade me. And I just need to go through my internal dialogue and processes. And so again, all of those things, whether you're consuming content, whether you're in silence, whether you just jam into some good tunes, there's a time and place for all of those things. And sometimes it's great to just be in silence and allow thoughts to come in and creativity. A lot of my best project ideas and thinking of things and creating things happen on a long mountain ride where I'm just in silence. And I come home and I'm like, Sonny, that's my wife's name. I'm like, Sonny, I just had the most unbelievable idea, but that wouldn't have happened if I was like plugged in and distracted and trying to do this and that. And this, people need to unplug and get out into nature, or just like sit and meditate and think, and just allow that creativity and a thought process to happen. But we're always so looking, fast and looking for the next quick fix and distraction and shiny light and squirrel and, all these things that we're missing out on the brilliant moments to just think, to reflect. And I think everybody should take more time to think and reflect.
Yeah. It's funny being an airline pilot. I travel the world. And I get to see a lot of different societies, different people, and I go, different countries all the time. And sometimes I just like to sit at the park and just watch the world go by in a society that I know nothing about. If I'm in, Frankfurt, Germany, or Tokyo, Japan, or wherever, and you just kind of consume it, and you're just sitting there watching it, and you're thinking like, man, this whole thing is going around me, and I'm just kind of a bystander, just soaking it in. And I love going to new places and just kind of doing that, just kind of watching the lay of the land and getting to experience the environment that I'm in.
Yeah, I have real quick. I have a pair of like blackout glasses that I wear.
Yeah.
Because I love to go people watch. One of my favorite places to go is Vegas.
Yeah.
And just sit and watch. But I love all the different countries and cultures and whatnot. I don't want to be like rude and like I stare at people, but I'm like, I am fascinated by the way people live in their cultures and whatnot. And it's amazing. Like, yes, we're all human and we're so closely connected, but the different cultures and stuff is very different. And it's fascinating to watch and whatnot. And I just put on my dark glasses and walk around and just take it in and enjoy, right?
Yeah. Now, when you need, just out of curiosity, when you need that push or the inspiration, what podcast or book or what was your go-to?
Yeah. So during the 100, I listened to Ed Milet every single day. And then when the 100 finished, I got a phone call and it was Ed Milet. And he was like, we'd love to have you a guest on the podcast. And it was just so nostalgic for me because his voice is just really soothing. And he's got a lot of great guests on his show. And I learned a ton. But it really got me through those 100 days. And I've become friends with Ed. And it was just really cool to do that and get through that. I listened to Tom Bilyeu, Impact Theory, and Rich Roll on his podcast, and did a lot of music listening, did a lot of audio books. I probably listened to 20 books over the course of those 100 days. I was just trying to occupy my mind because it's long, man. Those are long hours, especially when, you're trying to achieve a goal. You've made it past 50, you've broken your own world record. And then you get into like 60 through 90, right? Because you're past halfway, but you're not even close. It's not like this is like a 5-hour challenge and you're halfway and you're 2 hours in, you got only 2.5 to go. This was like weeks to go. And I called those my blue collar working days, to where it's like, okay, the excitement's obviously gone. We're 60 days into this thing. It's not going to be glamorous for the next 30 days, but it's essential in order to reach your goal. And I think that's why a lot of people in business or relationships or whatnot, they're not willing to do those blue collar hard working days that are monotonous, that it's just repetition, and they abandon course and they never get an opportunity to get those victory laps, those last 10 of 100, right? And get through. And I don't know if you know this part of our story, but after day 100, everybody celebrated and we went home and people expected us to sleep for 2 weeks. And I woke up the next day and I said, I'm going to do one more. And I got in the pool all by myself and swam 2.4 miles. And I was ready to bike 112 by myself. My team saw me in the pool and they said, not today, we're going to join you. And they biked 112 with me. And then we ran a final 26.2. So we did 101 in a row. Not because we had to, not because that was the goal of the commitment, but I really thought that I would be a hypocrite if I went around the world and I was like, hey guys, I know you can get backed into a corner. Things are tough. You can do one more. And they'll be like, well, did you do one more? Yeah, I did. I know exactly what it is. And I want to be a leader that doesn't tell you how to do things. I want to lead from the front and I'll show you first, and then I'll help you through your journey. That's the kind of leader that I want to be. And I think if everybody tried to adapt to that, we'd have a greater, stronger society of everybody helping each other do one more.
Would you say, is that or what was your biggest lesson, if there is a biggest lesson that you've learned in this journey up until the person that you are today, from all your experience? What is that one thing?
It would be to focus on the one thing.
Wonderful.
because that's a great book too. But we get so bogged down with lists and the enormity of it, and the huge goals, and it cripples people. It fills you with anxiety and depression and confusion and chaos and all these things. And those are all negative words. But if everyone was just like, okay, look, I'm scared of XYZ, and that's my fear, and it paralyzes me. Well, fear is just an emotion. And so what the best thing to do with a fear or a big task or a big goal is reverse engineer it. Reverse engineer it and come up with the one thing that's going to move the needle, and nothing else matters. And that's where it's the opposite of catastrophizing. Catastrophizing is everything matters, and I get overwhelmed and filled with anxiety. I'm on the side of the road having a panic attack and I can't breathe. Or it's the one thing, and anybody can do the one thing. I don't know if you're familiar with the program that Andy Frisella put out called 75 Hard.
Yeah.
That came about after a podcast that he and I did together, and it's been wildly successful. Well, if you look at, it's called 75 Hard, and so people just assume, well, this has got to be the hardest thing on the planet. And if you break it down, there's like 5, maybe 6, 7 tasks in it. Each task individually, dude, it's super easy. There's not a human being on the planet that couldn't do one of those tasks. But you put them all together,
right?
And this isn't a physical challenge. It's a mindset challenge. And at its core, it's a time management challenge. And time management takes discipline. It takes planning. It takes creativity. And that's what this program does. And that's why it's such a brilliant program, because if you wait too long, if you don't focus on just the one thing, and that's what you do with a program like 75 Hard, you break it down. What's my one task? All 4 of my teenage girls did 75 Hard. That means to me, it's not that outrageously difficult. It's about time management. It's about not looking at its enormity. It's not about its 75 days. It's not about the 6 different items. It's about one item today. That's it. And as long as you can do that, you'll be success. You'll wake up and you're like, oh, I'm on day 75. I just did the program. I did it, right? But we get so drawn into the hard, difficult, the task, the enormity, failure.
The catastrophizing of what it means to them, and just letting it pile on top.
Yep. And it's all a mindset shift.
Yeah. It's funny because my go-to is Andy Frisella and Ed Milet. When I'm at the gym or I'm doing something, I'm like, I got to just get my head straight. I got to listen to some real, conversations.
Well, and it's fascinating too, how incredibly different those two guys are, how they operate. They're business partners. They're both super powerful. Yeah. But man, they're opposites, man. Outside of their drive and desire to win, like the way they operate is very, very different.
Yeah, it's you can tell. I mean, even when they come together, they're it's a yin and yang almost, but they have the same common thread.
Yes,
trying to help people and doing the right thing and
winning.
Winning. Absolutely. Yeah, I think
those guys are winners, man.
100%. So I got a couple more questions for you, and I'll let you go. What is something that you hate? I hate to use the word hate because that's probably not the right term, but in this journey, everything that you've done, what's something that you just look back on, you're like, man, I wish this would change about the industry, about people looking at me? What is something that just gives you that sour taste?
People that read a headline and make assumptions, like clickbait. And really, people will make assumptions based on something that somebody said or something that isn't necessarily factual. And then they just come to assumptions about it. And I think that is something or advice that I could give everybody is let's not make assumptions about anybody, because we have no idea the journey they've been on, the experiences they've had, what's formed their perspective and perception. And so that's what's been really, really hard, almost impossible to change. But I wish people would not jump to assumptions, and they could see me and our team for who we are. Because if you really knew us and whatnot, because there's controversy in everybody's journey.
Sure.
Good, bad, and different, right or wrong, but it's perception. And so, I wouldn't change anything on my journey, because it's some of that darkness or negativity is what fueled the success of the 100. And the 100 was my final mic drop, F you, for lack of a better term. Yeah. But it's how, and it's the mold that we came out of. And because I really don't like the question, what advice would you give the younger version of yourself. And I would say I wouldn't give them any advice, because I'd want them to learn the same lessons that I learned.
Sure.
If I did have a piece of advice, it would be to believe in yourself and to continue to be authentic and to show up every single day in your journey, to not listen to any other outside influencers. But I wouldn't give myself very specific advice, because the lessons that I've learned by interacting and engaging in my journey are so valuable. I wouldn't want to take that away from myself.
That's what made you who you are. So if you give you advice to avoid what the person that you've become, it's kind of like the movie Back to the Future. You could be messing up the whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
So I agree. Let me ask you this. When you're all done and you're retired and you're sitting in Utah with your wife and the kids, what would you want to be known for? What do you want the people to look and say, James Lawrence X? What is that?
Gave me hope and courage on my journey so that I found happiness.
Oh, I like that. All right. One last question for you, man. One last question. If you could have a conversation, water, wine, beer, whiskey, whatever your flavor is, with someone, either dead, alive, imaginary, whoever that person is, who would you want to go and talk with, and what would you want to ask them?
Oh man, there's some great people. Jesus for one. Let's put the whole religious conversation to bed. Sure. Once and for all. I think that'd be a meaningful conversation to have. It would solve a lot of controversy. It would solve a lot of wars and deaths and all that. Let's just figure that out. Like, let's take away the mystery.
What did you mean when you said this? Kind of like that kind of.
What does exactly that mean when you said this? Can we be definitive here instead of like speculate?
Yeah.
So that would be a real obvious one for me. But I behind me I've got what I call the wall of greats. Just people that have changed their sport. And I have other pieces around my office in my house that is an extension of this. I'd like to sit down with any of them. Tiger Woods' story is unbelievable to me. Greatest rise in sports history, followed by the greatest fall in sports history, followed by the greatest 2 times the greatest comeback in sports history. I love the interview that he just did after the first round of the Masters that said, and I really resonate with this, few people, if anybody outside of my team, this is him talking, really understands the sacrifice and work that it took to get to this point, right? And I think, and it could be that way with a lot of people, but few people really appreciate or understand greatness because they can never grasp what it actually took to do it. I'd love, just for entertainment value, I'd love to sit down with Conor McGregor, Tiger Woods, George St. Pierre, Lance Armstrong, Jordan. I mean, just all these guys that changed the way that people played a sport. Just fun conversation, pick their brains. I don't know that anything specific that I'd ask them. I'd want it to just organic conversations, but just those greats. And for me, I just love sports. And so that's an easy one. I kind of live in my little own bubble. I do my own thing. I don't really follow business experts or things like that. I just love living life and adventure. And so I don't have a lot of time for all that extra stuff. And I consume myself with time with my wife and my kids, and I love riding my bike and just doing personal challenges.
So real quick, I do have another question. I promise this will be the last one, but like on a day off, a quote unquote day off for you, what does that look like to you? I mean, is it like, hey, I'm going to go do a couple 100 miles today, I'll be back after breakfast? Or what is a day off for someone like the Iron Cowboy?
Yeah, it's interesting. We do a lot of coaching, and our philosophy is stress, optimize, adapt, and recover. It's how high can you soar? Stress, optimize, adapt, recover. And part of that equation is recover. And so I actually put a big emphasis on recover. I am not of the camp of all out all the time, no pain, no gain kind of thing. Like there's a time and place for everything. So I take every Sunday off. Every single Sunday I take off. It's an opportunity to reset mind, body, spirit. For me, that is watching some sports. It's going to church. It's playing some card games, board games with my kids and my family. It's eating good food. That's my every week day off, reset, get ready for the next 6 days of holy hell, let's go.
I love it, man. I love it. Everyone needs that reset, right? You got to have that in your mind, the reset button for sure. Well, Mr. Lawrence, I really appreciate your time and knowledge and the conversation we had today. And I'm sure our guests are going to do that. I know anyone can find you anywhere, but if somebody wanted to find you about the mentoring that you do and the coaching or anything, I'm assuming you have one go-to place that they can go to.
Yeah, my website is ironcowboy.com. Pretty easy. That's where we launch all of our books, the documentaries that are coming out. Our current documentary is on Amazon Prime. And then the biggest social platform I'm on is Instagram, and it's Iron Cowboy James.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge. And I just, man, I have to say, I'm not impressed by many people, but you impressed me just by your drive and determination and everything you've done. So I definitely will like to follow you and see what you're doing on the next journey and where that goes. So thank you for coming on today.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate it. Have an amazing day for all the listeners, and God bless.
Thank you. And everybody watching the High Stakes with Steve Rozenberg, on behalf of James and myself, thank you so much. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our podcast show, where you can find it on all the usual suspect channels. We will be back next week with another amazing guest, and we'll see you guys then. Bye-bye. All right, let me stop the recording. That was awesome, man. Thank you so much.